Good evening, MOCA friends. Sorry, my name is Yifan Wu. I'm pronunciator, director of programs, and chief of staff at the Museum of Chinese in America. So it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this insightful discussion with online food writer and cookbook author Patricia Tanumihardja as we explore her latest culinary work, Mortar and Pestle, classic Indonesian recipes for the modern kitchen. This cookbook presents a vibrant collection of 80 mouth-watering recipes, each reflecting decades of family traditions and a deep connection to Indonesian cuisine. During tonight's talk, Patricia will share her unique perspective as a third cultural kid, born in Jakarta and raised in Singapore, and how her cultural heritage has shaped her approach to food and storytelling. We are also joined by Sharon Wee, author of Growing Up in a Noya Kitchen, a Paranaka family's memories of Singapore. The conversation will be moderated by Kian Manko, author of the award-winning cookbook, Finesse Clouds and Jade Trees, Essential Techniques of Authentic Chinese Cooking. If you enjoyed tonight's program, please consider supporting MOCA. Your generosity is vital to our mission and help us create more programs like this. Donation can be made on our website, and we can accept cash, Venmo, PayPal. Additionally, as you see, we're also selling the cookbooks for tonight. And again, the price, if you kind of purchase on site, it's slightly discounted, and of course, you're supporting the nonprofit rather than Amazon and other online retailers. And we're selling these mortar and pestles for $35, and then the Nonya Kitchen also for $35. And the Phoenix class for $25. And once again, we do accept credit card, PayPal, Venmo, and also you can make a donation online. So for those actually joining us live, we also encourage you to submit questions anytime during the conversation. And this event is also being recorded for on-demand viewings on our YouTube channel after the program. So thank you once again for your patience. And without further ado, I will hand it over to our moderator, Kian, to start the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Is this okay? Right. Well, thank you very much for coming out and join us in this discussion. We are talking about civilization food today, and the two main cuisine that we're going to be talking about is Indonesian and what we call Nyonya cuisine. And we'll talk about what Nyonya means. It's a local combination of Chinese and Malay and local dishes. So fused together, there's a particular cuisine that's known as Nyonya. And anyway, so there are two experts here that we're going to be talking with. One is with an Indonesian cuisine expert, and then there's Sharon, who actually grew up in Singapore and her family grew up in Singapore, and cooking definitely is part of the family culture and everything. So we're going to talk about those cuisine. But before we go into the actual cooking cuisine itself, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the background of the two authors here. So Pat, let's talk a little bit about when you're growing up, who did you learn your cooking from, and how all came out?
Well, so I have to clarify, I do not consider myself an Indonesian cuisine expert.
You're too modest.
Because, the Indonesian cuisine that I'm familiar with is the cook my mom's. And I was born in Jakarta, but afterwards, I was not back to Singapore because my parents were already living in Singapore. So my knowledge of Indonesian cuisine is through my mother's lens. And we would go back to Indonesia maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and then I would enjoy it. I like to get served Indonesian foods, but I always thought my mom was this. So, and if you look at the cover of my cookbook, it's co-written with my mom because all the recipes are hers. And so who did I? Obviously, the person that I learned to come from was my mom. From the time that like the around. I was helping her roll lumpia. Lumpia is like spring rolls, fried spring rolls. Um, and as I got older, I was tasked with what I call tusuk sate, which is to poke the meat into the satay skewers. And it was mostly a process of osmosis because I was watching my mom cook in the kitchen. She'd be in the corner pounding the spices in her mortar and pestle. And I would be right next to her, and I would have a toy set. We call it like a recipe set. Mas means to cook like in Indonesian. Yeah, I take like all her remnants, like maybe like the carrots, the like ginger skin or whatever she tossed out that she wasn't putting inside her pestle. Chilies, of course, because that was I would have probably cried. But yeah, I would just imitate her in the kitchen, and I watched, and I would learn that way. It was not until I came to the US to go to college at age 19 that I actually cooked on my own. So previously it was just like learning and watching and tasting, but my mom was always there. So when I went away to college, I found that I really, really missed the food of my childhood. And so I would make long distance calls. In those days, this was like the 90s. And oh my gosh, they were expensive phone calls, but they were worth it. And my mom would, dictate to me all the different ingredients that went into my favorite dishes. Most of them I didn't attempt to replicate because it was too complicated and it was hard to get the ingredients. But there were a few simple dishes like, bami, ayam, that's in my cookbook that I could make as a college student, and the ingredients were all very easy to find. So that's how I learned how to cook. And over the years, with the advent of like YouTube and the internet, it's easy to find recipes, Indonesian recipes. Not all of them will work, but it's through a process of trial and error and just watching. So that's how I learned in the end. Because there are not very many Indonesian cookbooks in the Western world. So a lot of them are in Indonesian. My mom actually has a whole stack of Indonesian cookbooks, which I perused in research for this cookbook. But in the end, the recipes are all my family's recipes. So they may be different from if any of you have experienced Indonesian cuisine, it might not be exactly what you have tried before, but this is my experience of what Indonesian cuisine is.
So I guess you would consider your mom's cooking in Jawa.
Yes, for sure. It's Japanese. Yeah. My mom was born in Bekasi, which is just outside of Jakarta, and she grew up in Jakarta. My dad was born in Cirebon, which is on the northern coast, and he grew up in Bandung. So the food that we ate was mainly Japanese and very, very sweet because
and I think specifically more like Jawa, which is Western Jawa.
Yeah, so but yeah, the Japanese have a very sweet too. So a lot of the foods very, very sweet. Lots of palm sugar, lots of kecap manis, which is sweet soy sauce.
Yeah, I mean, ketchup manis is such a mainstream condiment here in the US, but it really is Indonesian ingredients. It's used widely everywhere. So how did you come up with the name Mortar and Pestle?
Well, I came up with the name Mortar and Pestle because the very foundation of Indonesian cooking is all born out of mortar and pestle. Because the spice paste, which we call bumbu bumbu, is you have spice paste with just about every Indonesian dish out there. And the traditional way of making the spice paste is in a mortar and pestle, which we call cobek and ulekan. So cobek is the mortar, ulekan is the pestle, which I'm sorry I was not able to bring my set because it's very heavy. But it's there's actually there are pictures inside the cookbook. But if you take a look at the pestle, it's actually formed like a buffalo sword. So yeah, it's quite different from what you would find in Thai cooking or any of the other Southeast Asian cuisines. And it's made of volcanic rock, usually basalt, sometimes granite. And so, but I tell people The traditional way of making a bumbu is with a mortar and pestle, but I'm not gonna say anything if you use a food processor because I'll use a food processor too.
Well, I guess we all have to become modern in the kitchen. Yeah. And many of the YouTube channels of Indonesian cooking, they are also using food processor.
If you go to Indonesia, you will see that a lot of people do use the food processor. And then if they have helpers in the house, then actually even the helpers use the food processor.
Yeah, but it is nice to be able to actually use the modern pestle.
It's the texture turns out very different. So I have to admit, that texture of your spice paste turn out a lot smoother and whereas in a food processor, because the ingredients are chopped roughly as opposed to massaged and crushed so that all the cells break and the aromas in all the different ingredients, they just twist, right, as opposed to just being chopped and cut. So it's a very different texture. The flavor is also different. Even like when I make gajang, which is peanut sauce, I prefer to I will roast the peanuts in the oven, and then I usually use the mortar and pestle to grind it because the texture is just so much better.
Right. Mm-hmm. So Sharon, you also learned cooking in your mother's kitchen. So tell us a little bit about your experience learning from your mother.
My mom actually died in 2001, and that was the genesis of this book. I actually lived in Hong Kong. It was my first job. I worked for Mars Confectionery, or M&M Mars, and I was a brand manager for pasta sauce, along with Skittles and M&Ms. So my mom, while I was living in Hong Kong, would send me these little books, like easy to cook things. And whenever I went back to Singapore, she would cook all my favorite dishes. And sometimes I brought back, like the pork dumplings, they call kway chap, back to Hong Kong. Yeah, we call it kway chap, yes. And so what happened was, like you, I actually grew up in a kitchen where I watched my mom cook, especially during Chinese New Year. There was a lot of baking. I've actually baked a pandan chiffon cake for you guys before you leave. A little slice for you. So she made a lot of these cakes and cookies, and we had a whole entourage of her friends come to help out. And I was tasked with putting the cookies into the bottles, etc. And like Pat, I would watch and listen because you're all eyes and ears in the kitchen, and you hear them talk about, the rumpa has to be, tumbuk halus, which means you have to pound it until it's fine. I do write about the mortar and pestle, my father's opinions about pounded spices as opposed to blended. So that's really how I learned. Now, with regards to learning how to cook from my mom, it was, unfortunately, as I mentioned, she passed away. But what I did was I interviewed a lot of my relatives and my sisters with the intricacies of Nyonya cooking. And that was really how I came about with this book. And then, the memories, if I did remember something about how my mom did something, I would ask my sisters. I have 5 and they're much older than I am. And, when you have a sisters group chat and everyone's just like, oh yeah, mom did it this way. No, mom did it that way. Even within that, you do actually, and I would say, but I remember she did it this way. So it was all these things, and one of my sisters actually learned to cook, observing. So that was the important thing.
Correct.
And she jotted everything down. Yes. And it's also, when you practice, the important thing about recipe testing in my case was that when it comes to family recipes, we relied on our own family to test it. So when my sisters tasted my food, for example, they say, oh, you know, you've got to adjust this or you've got to adjust that. And that was how we came about tweaking our recipes, because only your family knows exactly how your mom cooked it. So that was really how we came with like consensus of what the recipe should be like.
You read a lot of cultural explain all the the differences in Nyonya cuisine as the in Nyonya culture. Just talk a little bit about what is Nyonya culture and what is the cuisine for Nyonya cooking.
Cooking, in my sense, well, first of all, let me explain what pranakans are. Okay. Now, the word pranakan embedded in there is A-N-A-K. And that actually is the Malay word for anak, meaning child. And pranakan implies child of. So as far back as 500 years ago, the Chinese came down the southern coast of China to look for livelihood, business. And they settled in this Southeast Asian region that encompassed Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, even Thailand. In doing so, they established businesses. They actually couldn't bring their women folk. It was actually not allowed. The women were not allowed to leave China. And the men actually waited for the monsoon season to clear before they could sail back to China. And in the meantime, they established their businesses. Oftentimes, the speculation, and there's been research that they married or they intermingled with the local women. The local women probably had connections. They came from families that knew the lay of the land, so you could actually start a business. And you had family ties. Now these men actually also decided to have offspring, so that when they went back to China, they could have the offspring and the women folk take care of the property. So there was this group that came about, and it wasn't just the Peranakan Chinese. You also had the Indians doing that, and you also had the Arabs doing that. So there are different types of Peranakans, right? So with the Peranakan Chinese, what happened was the children grew up speaking this language, the mother tongue, which was a local Malay/Indonesian language, because there are some words that are actually Indonesian by origin. And they also ate spicy food, but also honoring their forefathers. It was also incorporating Chinese ingredients like soybean, and like that's a lot of like the dried goods that you have. And then when you come to the local, it would be like coconut and spices, because obviously a place like Indonesia was known for its spices. Then what happened was, over time, this Peranakan community actually co-opted more and more of the Chinese men coming over, even as recent as the 1900s, because that's how they started. So they felt that, okay, we'll give this guy a leg up, he'll marry into our family, and he'll help run the business. Marry our daughter, and be co-opted into the business. That's why the Peranakan Chinese over time continue to be a very Chinese community. The other thing that we need to note also is that the local women probably were not Muslim, otherwise we wouldn't be eating pork. And there's this notion that, oh yeah, they married Malay, but if you look at Nusantara and the whole region, there was a lot of seafaring going around. So the Indonesians would have come over to Malaysia. So there's probably a lot of ancestry that stems from the Indonesian archipelago. And there's also Portuguese. Okay, so I've had myself DNA tested, and I do know that I do have a higher percentage of local blood, but I also do have Southern European, just because the Portuguese, unlike the British or the Dutch, actually encouraged their Portuguese settlers to intermarry, and that was their way of colonizing.
Well, Malacca was a Portuguese colony for many, many years. So that's the reason why the Portuguese there in Malaysia and probably. And of course, Indonesia was colonized by the Dutch. So there's also Dutch blood in a lot of all these mixed intermarriages. So anyway, now that we've talked about your background, let's talk a little bit about what food is like, your experience as you were growing up and so on. And let's talk about Indonesian food. But what are the iconic Indonesian foods that you can think of in your inputs? Yeah, I'm gonna ship out.
The very first one, if I'm not wrong, is satay. So who's had satay? Did any of you know that it's from Indonesia? So I know satay is now like considered a dish like you have satay in Thai food, you have satay in Singapore food, Malay food. So, but yeah, it's become quite universal. But satay is actually Indonesian in origin. Research has put that it's Indonesian in origin.
I know what when I flip them.
So, but it actually comes from the Middle Eastern traders who landed in the north, and so they brought their kebabs with them, and the local Indonesians translated it into smaller bits of meat, skewered onto sticks. In the original form of sticks used is it's called lidi. Lidi is like the spine of the coconut. And nowadays you'll find them using banana sticks. And of course, the local addition was the peanut sauce because they're peanuts. So in some recipes we'll use coconut milk. Some recipes don't have coconut milk inside the peanut sauce, but it's flavored with lime leaves, makrut lime leaves, or what we call daun jeruk purut in Indonesian. So that's. You move on to the next one. And okay, gado-gado is also a very iconic Indonesian dish. So it's a similar peanut sauce to the sauce that accompanies satay, but I think the sauce for gado-gado has more sour notes, tamarind or lime juice, and it's mixed together with a combination of both fresh and cooked vegetables. And then this one is rendang. It was voted as the world's #1 dish by CNN travel blog in 2001. So everybody keeps talking about that. So, but so yeah, so this is rendang, and this is actually a dish that was brought by Indian merchants to Minangkabau, which is in Kalimantan, and. So, and it comes from actually an Indian curry. I think, which curry is it? It's a yellow curry. But anyway, I can't remember which Indian curry it originates from. But the local Minang people decided to cook it down until it caramelizes. And they added coconut milk and spices like lemongrass and kaffir. So we're not supposed to use the word kaffir for these anymore. Yeah, we have to call them these because it's considered the kaffir is considered a derogatory term in South Africa. So the food community decided to do away with using that word to describe maka. Anyway, so yeah, so all those different herbs and spices go into the rendang, and a tree rendang is cooked for 4 hours at least, until it's dry and dark and all the coconut has caramelized, the sugars in the coconut has caramelized. So yeah, my mom doesn't cook it for that long, so she likes her rendang saucier. So rendang. And this is soto. So soto is kind of like a soup. And there are two types. I like to say that there are two types of soups in Indonesian cuisine. So soto is traditionally like Indonesian. It's like I guess born and bred in Indonesia. Whereas if you call something soup, it's usually Dutch version. Like we have sop buntut, which means oxtail soup. So that's definitely it comes from the Dutch colonialists. So soto ayam is a very popular dish. You can serve it with glass noodles and or rice, and it's flavored with white pepper and turmeric. And it's very fragrant. Traditionally it's topped with lemon basil. Lemon basil is not very easy to find, at least not where I live in Northern Virginia. So, anyway.
Right, so what I would say was,
Okay.
so those are just some of the dishes that serve commonly. What about Nyonya dishes? Okay, so we start with Thai tea.
So kueh pie tea, they call it top hats as well. It's a crispy cup. And there's a skill to doing it. You also have a mold. Research has shown actually, and I have a good friend, Christopher, who has done quite a bit of research. Pie tea could have originally come from the US. He's got molds to prove it.
Right.
So he actually has bought molds. Metal molds. So these are little cups that you put in the same topping that you put what it calls lumpia and I call lumpia. Okay. And it's good for tea time. You drizzle some chili garlic salt on it, and you top with some cilantro. And you know it's.
You want to describe a little bit how the is made? I think that's interesting because what it is mold. Go ahead.
So I should have brought the mold.
Yeah.
The first time I did it, the molds nowadays are actually very heavy. Okay, and the first time I did it, it was like, oh my gosh, this is really quite heavy. And the ladies of old actually have antique molds that are very light and somewhat hollow. They're more than 100 years old. You actually have to, like season it and put it in hot oil. And then you sort of dip it into this whole big pot of batter, right? And then very quickly put it in that oil as well. In this book that I've written, I've actually gone into quite a lot of instructions on how to get it right. So once you master it, it's actually like almost an autopilot. And I talk a lot about my neighbor, Auntie Petty. I actually got a very nice living out of it. She spent afternoons doing these kueh pie tea shells. They're actually quite expensive now. They're like maybe 5, 6, or 10 cents a cup. So you can imagine when she was doing it, right? She had like boxes of the canisters of these, because they're so addictive. You can actually eat maybe around 10, 20 of them. I was like, yeah, that's how you do it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that the potential is, remember the shells are actually fried.
And gonna like, jiggle it a little bit and make sure.
Unmold it.
Sticks, okay. And you couldn't do it too soon, otherwise it all collapse in that hot oil. So there is a nuance to doing it right. And this is why, the more instructions in a recipe, the less of error, the fewer errors we'll have.
So the next one is Nyonya Laksa.
So laksa was something that I had almost every other Sunday, or maybe at least one Sunday a month. Laksa is a spicy broth. It's in the Nyonya version. We would have like a prawn stock with coconut milk. And laksa actually refers to the noodles. Okay, so it's this white noodle. It's a little bit thicker, and it's a rice noodle that you blanch it. And the way my mom did it was that she would actually scoop some of that gravy to sort of bathe and drench the noodles, pour it off, and then put the gravy in again. If you get what I mean, like, you know, she'll sort of pre-soak her noodles with the gravy, and then drench it, remove it, and then add that whole bowl of gravy again. If you go into YouTube, there is a Singapore TV episode called Food Feud, and I'm actually featured in it, and it's about the laksa wars. So Singapore has a lot of like laksa vendors. They all claim to have this people. So it go to YouTube. It's called Food Feud, and it's all about this particular episode is about laksa. And if you fly on Singapore Airlines, it's on Singapore Airlines as well.
Well, laksa actually is a common term for this similar type of noodle soup. And in Indonesia, there's laksa, right? But it was laksa, right?
Yes.
Right.
Just also to clarify, the Peranakan Chinese in Singapore and Malacca share closer palate to the Indonesian. So that would be like more coconut and more what we call lemak, right? Whereas the one in Penang, the ones in Penang would be more sourish, a little bit more fish, and so they are famous for what they call Penang Asam Laksa, which is a very tangy tamarind-based laksa with mackerel fish. And then there's also like other laksas, like Johor laksa, so laksa, there are different variants of laksa, all spread throughout Southeast Asia.
Okay, so next this is how you no. Oh, I'm keluar. Okay.
So this is actually probably one of the strongest links with Indonesia, but I think the way the Indonesians eat it is rawon. And so anyone who goes to Indonesia, my sister actually dated an Indonesian, and I think he charmed us because he'd come back with bags full of, okay, so they're actually from Indonesia, okay, and these are like shells, nuts, and they're actually supposedly toxic, and they have to be buried in volcano ash to remove that toxicity. So by the time I get it, I have to soak these hard shells for about a week, change the water, scrub it to remove all that dirt. And there are different ways of doing it, but this is a very iconic Peranakan Chinese dish. You'll have to crack it, and that's where the pestle comes in, because you use the pestle to crack these nuts because they have a mouth, okay? And then you take out all the little shrapnels and you dig out the flesh. Some actually just cook it, just cook the flesh. Some pop it back in, some just mix it in the gravy. I think in Indonesia, they make it into a sauce. Yeah, but for us, what we do is we mash it up with ground pork and spices and stuff it all back in. And then we also cook it with chicken, like braised chicken. And part of the reason why you actually add the meat is actually so that you can stretch how many wakluwak you can serve, especially if you have a big meal with a lot of guests. So that's wakluwak.
Okay, so the next one is kue lapis. This is what you just simple earlier. Now, what do you want? Okay. Kue lapis actually is originally Indonesian. It's consumed so much everywhere in Southeast Asia that it's become like to all the different cuisines in Southeast Asia. But you want to describe it?
So, so there are actually two types of kueh lapis. So kueh lapis literally means layered cake. And the one that I was just reading earlier is called kueh lapis legit. So it's layered cake that's rich layered cake. And then the other type of kueh lapis is made with rice flour and sometimes glutinous flour. And that one is steamed. Kueh lapis legit is baked. So, but for each instance, they are baked or steamed in layers. We pour one layer into a batter into the mold, and then steam or you bake. And then when that is baked, you pour the next layer, and then it just keeps going on and on and on. So kueh lapis legit is actually it originates from the colonial Dutch. Actually, the whole baking tradition in Indonesia originates from the Dutch. So I think, besides the Nusantara region, which comprises maritime Southeast Asia, so Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, the other Southeast Asian countries don't have a very big baking tradition. But in Indonesia, we do, like during the holidays, we have a lot of baked goods like kue nastar, which is pineapple tarts. That's baked, and you have cheese bites. I don't know how to describe that, but so yeah, we have a very rich baking tradition, and so the kueh lapis legit is made with what is called spekkoek spices. Spekkoek is actually Dutch for bacon cake.
Spice cake, I think.
No, spek.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's named after bacon because of all the different layers, just like how bacon has different layers. And I was telling someone earlier that I actually bake a version of kueh lapis that I don't do. I just use the same ingredients that you use in kueh lapis, which, depending on the recipe and who you ask, you use up to 30 ingredients. It's that rich. So, yeah. Do you have anything else?
So there are lots of crossovers between Peranakan food and Indonesian, and I don't know if you have this involved, but just so you know, the other kueh lapis is this one. It's the colorful one. So I also do have the kueh lapis spekkoek in my book. And the reason being that, we actually served it during Chinese New Year as well. The spices are like the four, what I think in Malaysia, they call it like the four anak, right? Yeah, so, it's like cinnamon, cloves, cardamom, nutmeg, right? So it lends that very nice tinge to the cake. Similarly, the Indonesians, my mom actually made friends with Indonesian women who were very renowned for their cooking. So she refined her cooking even more so with the kueh lapis. Same with the soto ayam, the beef rendang. So that's always like, the crossover.
So now that we've like looked at some of these traditional or trendsetters, iconic, the Indonesian and Indonesian cooking, there are multiple other dishes that in Indonesian cooking and Malaysian cooking that's Chinese inspired. They have a lot of the dishes that are roots really in Chinese cooking, and you can really tell. So I'm going to show you a couple of the dishes. This is the first one is the babi kecap.
So babi kecap literally means pork sauce. So the ketchup in the babi kecap is kecap manis, which is sweet soy sauce, and this is a rendition of red cookbook or hong shao roll, which is very would you say it's like a very classic Chinese?
Classic Chinese, yeah.
So
Belly.
yeah, you use pork belly. I'm scared of pork belly, so I usually just use pork shoulder. Pork leg. So getting old. So yeah, it's kind of dark soy sauce and or light soy sauce. It uses sweet soy sauce, and it also has a whole hard-boiled eggs in them, and
Which is also very Chinese. The Chinese also
very
put,
Chinese. But we also put tofu in it. Yeah. So do you put tofu in your?
tofu we do it in like the flavor pot, flavor potting, you know, the when you braise for a long time in like beef, yeah.
But yeah, we sometimes put tofu, and my mom likes to use both fresh onions as well as bawang goreng, which is like fried shallots. So she uses that as top.
Right. So this one is similar to ketchup, but in Nyonya version is known as tau yu ba, which really just means soy sauce pork. So Sharon, do you want to describe that?
So it's true blue comfort food. We typically have it with porridge. Porridge is kind of universal. You all have it when you're not feeling well. Right. So this goes very well with porridge. I would also sometimes put the medium tofu, more so than the tofu puffs. I think that's very popular these days to put tofu puffs. So it's a little bit runnier. It's because and it's braised in dark soy sauce. And as opposed to using ketchup manis, what I do is I actually season my pork first with sugar and dark soy sauce. And then I would fry it to caramelize it. And then I would add more of my dark soy sauce and water and let it simmer until it's very, and unlike Pat, you can tell the size. I like my belly, and your friends love it too.
Actually, you mentioned caramelizing it with sugar. The Chinese also do the same thing. So it's a very similar, all originated like I think from the Chinese like cookbook. Yeah. Caramelize the sugar before, right? Yeah. So the next thing the one that I wanted to show is this known in Indonesia known as Siomai Bandung.
So Bandung is actually a city that's about 4 hours from the capital of Jakarta, and it's at higher elevation, so it's cooler. They say that the women in Bandung are very beautiful because of the cooler weather. I have no idea that that's true, but siomay Bandung is one of the dishes that's very famous from that region, and it's basically stuffed vegetables with chicken meat and or fish or prawns. So if you've had Hakka Yong Tau Fu, it's very similar. And my family uses pork because we eat pork, we're not Muslim. But in Indonesia, it's always made with chicken, ground chicken. So, and instead of the bean paste sauce that you will find in Hokkien Hakka Yong Tau Fu, we eat it with peanut sauce. So everything with peanut sauce.
Actually, one of the about Yong Tau Fu. And in Nyonya cooking, the Yong Tau Fu is stuffed with fish paste. So I think a lot of it is because the Muslim culture, pork is not used. Yeah. Yeah.
Yong Tau Fu is actually a Hakka dish in Singapore. So I think we have it Peranakan cooking.
Stop Peranakan cooking.
We have Moya, which is 5 spice.
Right.
Like you wrap it in the bean curd sheet and you fry.
Right. So and also noodles is used a lot in both Indonesian food and Nyonya cooking as well, and fried noodles is a typical, right?
Yeah, noodles definitely came from it's of Chinese origin, and so we have so many different types of noodles in Indonesia. Mee goreng is one of the most common, and as I was mentioning earlier, also is like the bakmi ayam, which is also a very popular dish. It's basically just noodles with a topping of meat and mushrooms. Also seasoned with sweet soy sauce. Just about everything is seasoned with sweet soy sauce. But so mee goreng and nasi goreng. Nasi goreng is fried rice, so those are definitely Chinese in origin. But we instead of light soy sauce or dark soy sauce, we use ketchup manis, and we don't put ginger into our fried rice. So I actually developed a recipe for I think it was Food 52, and somebody made a comment. It's not real fried rice because there's no ginger. And I was like, that's because my mom doesn't use ginger, in our fried rice. It's Indonesian fried rice. It's not Chinese fried rice.
Well, in Chinese fried rice, we don't really ginger. Garlic is the aromatic thing.
Yeah, and and also sometimes we put terasi, which is a fermented shrimp paste in the fried rice as well. So yeah, it adds a lot of flavor.
So it's the pad thai, right?
The Hokkien Mee.
Hokkien mee.
So Hokkien Mee, the noodles are the Chinese yellow noodles, which is also something interesting. There is a dish in Singapore called mee rebus, which is actually considered a Malay dish. But you can see that there's an interchange. The Malays actually adopted the Chinese noodles and made it spicy, and the sauce is actually thickened with sweet potato.
But they don't
They
put
mash it up,
tao in it, which is
Yeah.
which is
which
Chinese.
is Chinese, and they serve it with like sliced green chili. This one, the Hokkien Mee, is what we would serve during Chinese New Year and also for birthdays. Because in the Chinese culture, you're supposed to have noodles for long life, right? You also have fish. And that would be, for some reason, the Peranakan's never really had like fish for Chinese New Year. I think it's because we didn't like passing around this fish. But we have the dainty fish balls and fish cakes. So this one has like fish balls, fish cakes in it. Interestingly enough, if you serve it at a funeral, at a wake, the ingredients have to be dried. So like dried squid, they would do that. They would use hydrated dried goods.
Okay. Now the next thing that I'm going to show you this is jiaqiang, which is really mixed vegetable. It really is a mixed vegetable stir fry. That's hard, right? And actually, it's also the origin of chop suey. It's all the same roots. Korean use the same, they also call chap chai. Right. Well, actually, in Chinese, the chap chai can also have this. So you want to understand or? Yeah. So basically, that's what it is. Like we wanted to show the very different variations, but it's all from the same root. And next thing is what I wanted to show is the popiah versus lumpia, because this is all very there's a subtle differences, right? You want to describe popiah and lumpia?
I think is probably as close as you can get to Hokkien-ese spring rolls. I find it kind of hard to distinguish the two, honestly. I think it's how we do it. We add like chili paste to it, which makes it a little bit spicier. But the ingredients, you don't put like shrimp paste in it. You don't localize it with anything that's too spicy. So this is probably one of the most Chinese of the Peranakan Chinese dishes that we have. I do want to go back a little bit, and sorry for digressing, about the 30 eggs for kueh lapis. I did learn something about baking, and it wasn't just about the Dutch influencing baking in our part of the world. A lot of it was actually the Portuguese. And the 30 eggs, from what I've understood, it's also because I just came back from Portugal, but then the 30 eggs were derived from two reasons. One being that, they use egg white to build the facades of the churches and buildings. And also, apparently, they use the egg whites to starch the nuns and the nuns' uniform. So, what are you going to do with all the leftover egg yolks? So that's why our cakes are all really dense with a lot of egg yolks. We have our kaya egg jam. I don't know if you have it in Indonesia, but then yeah. So that's part of it. Sorry, just.
So in Indonesia, we have what is called lumpia goreng. And this is specifically to Semarang, which is in the north part of Jammu. And Admiral Cheng Ho actually landed in Semarang, and legend has it that a lot of his crew, Chinese crew, decided that they wanted to stay in Semarang, and they buried local women. And that is why you have a tradition and a food culture that is very Chinese actually in that part of Indonesia. And lumpia goreng it's stuffed with bamboo shoots. So instead of
Hikama.
I was thinking bangkong. Bangkong is
Hikama.
Indonesian word for hikama. So instead of hikama, or what else do they use in China? Like Chinese spring.
Chinese, right, but the Chinese use a lot of cabbage.
Cabbage and carrots. Yeah. So we use bamboo shoots and pork, ground pork, and some shrimp, either like fresh shrimp or heavy, which is dried shrimp. And so it's all, it's all stir fried together and then wrapped up in the skins and then deep fried again. And it's served with this sweet sauce that you can either use ketchup manis to flavor it, or use palm sugar with lots of garlic with cut chili padi, like Thai bird chili.
Thai bird chili.
And it's
Thai chili.
With Thai chilies. And I just discovered this when I actually went to Semarang for the very first time a couple of years ago, that you're supposed to eat it with those green onions. So you take a bite, the lumpia, and then you take a bite of the green onion at the same time. But yeah, so yeah. And I was going to say, what else was I going to say? I was going to mention something else. Oh yeah, so and if you've had Filipino lumpia, it's kind of similar. I'm not quite sure what the ties are, but the Filipino lumpia is also really similar. But I think it's mostly
meat. Yeah.
So,
Talking about ketchup manis, one thing I also need to add is that for the fresh popiah that we use, we do actually put a black sauce, but it's a sweet flour sauce. It's not the ketchup manis. So and then we also fry our leftover popiah. Right. And then we also fry our popiah. We call it popiah goreng, right? And we dip it in the same black sauce. So it's basically like recycling leftovers. There's a very interesting thing about Semarang. Semarang is actually a very Peranakan Chinese stronghold. And there was actually a very famous sugar tycoon by the name of Wee Tiong Hao. Okay, so I've just read about his daughter's wives. He had several wives, but he was actually one of the world's richest men. And Semarang is definitely well known for its Chinese community. But very interestingly enough, Wee Tiong Hao had a very beautiful daughter who became the wife of the first foreign minister of pre-communist China, the nationalists, Wellington Koo. And through her father's wealth, she actually helped to set up the embassy in Paris and in the UK for the Chinese nationalists. However, she's Chinese Indonesian by descent, and she actually ended her life here in New York. And if you go to the Met Museum, I think they do actually have some of her outfits there. So, Semarang, the girl from Semarang becomes really famous.
So, yeah, I think we're getting a bit late now. So we basically are ready to open up the floor for questions. Does anybody have any questions?
So can I just ask you about one of my favorites? In, I don't know if it's in the culture.
So camping.
Okay.
Exactly. I love it so much. I grew up eating it. It's a little bitter.
Yeah.
Right? Is it? Can you explain a little bit?
So thing is a cracker, just like a shrimp chip or something, and it's made from a nut we call belinjo in Indonesia. But as we discovered yesterday at Indo-Java Groceries, did you? Yes, it is available here. I'll give you the address there. But yes, it's also called Adi oats. And I have never heard of this term before, but yes, so it's basically the nut that's pounded and then mixed with some flour, oil, or water, and then flattened into cakes, like really thin cakes, and then sun dried. And you deep fry them, just like shrimp chips or prawn crackers, and then they kind of yeah, it has it. Yes, and I always dip it into ketchup once.
Indo-Java has an version that has sugar on it, so it's which I don't like. Yeah, it's sweet and sweet. Any other question? No. So if we don't have any other questions, actually, finish it by. Yeah, go ahead.
Speak to how you think Indonesia or Indonesian cuisine is changing today, how it might be different today compared to your mother's or your parents or grandparents' generation?
The evolution of food is inevitable, and I honestly cannot speak to how Indonesian cuisine has evolved in Indonesia because I don't live there and I haven't lived there. But I do know for a fact that Indonesia has been trying to shed its Dutch history. So I talked to one of my mentors. His name is Chef William Wongso, and he's like Indonesia's culinary ambassador. And he was telling me that dishes like croquette, which is potato croquettes, risoles, which is it's like a bechamel chicken and vegetable filling wrap. Fricadelle is like a cutlet. Pastel panggang, which is kind of like I call it an Indonesian shepherd's pie because it's got a potato topping and when the ingredients inside are very Asian. Got like glass noodles. You have my mom likes to put spam in it, and it's got wood ear mushrooms. So all these different dishes, even though they're so intrinsic in Indonesian food, they don't consider it Dutch anymore. They don't consider it Dutch influence. They just say that it's Indonesian. And I'm sure maybe some of you have heard of rice tafel, which means rice table. This was a tradition during colonial times where the Dutch would have these big feasts and they would have maybe 40 to 60 different dishes which are Indonesian in origin. Like Indonesian dishes like rendang, sotong, or sambals, and they would be brought out one by one by servers. Traditionally they were male servers wearing all white with a sarong, and it was a way to show off their pomp and circumstance. To show that the Dutch owned this colony that was so rich in local resources. So when I was growing up in the 80s, I would go back to Indonesia and my parents would take us to go eat rice tafel. But now, if you go back to Indonesia, you hardly find restaurants that serve rice tafel anymore. If you go to Holland, you will find rice tafel everywhere. So basically in Indonesia, you would have what is called nasi padang, which also, they serve you an assortment of dishes, but there aren't that many dishes, and they just lay everything on the table in front of you. It's similar yet different, but yeah. So
Is-
Yes, I thought that Tok Panjang got them from Iceland because of the way it was laid out. So just so you know, Tok is Chinese for table, and Panjang is Malay for long. So it's long table. And the way that I grew up eating it was that we all sat in long tables. The seniors would start first. So my father, the brothers-in-law, the uncles, it's very chauvinistic way of doing it. And then, it filters down to the least senior family members. You take turns, you change over. And you never had to reach out like Thanksgiving, right? You don't reach out for the big turkey drumstick. You had your own little set of little plates that you would share with maybe 4 to 6 people. So a lot of little plates with all the food, and my whole chapter is about how to construct a meal. You have the curry, the rendang, the acar, and the sambal belacan, and all that. And that enables you to reach out just to you or next to Pat, never cross to Ken. Okay, however, there is new argument that Tok Panjang in the Peranakan culture actually stem from ancestral worship. That they serve the food to the ancestors at the altar, and then when it's over and done with, they would just like drag the table, extend it, and everyone sits down and eats. And that the food that we ate or served for Chinese New Year, all the dark dishes, were actually not supposed to be served because they were considered, meant for worship, ancestral worship. So I personally am going to do more research on that because I don't think that was really the case. Maybe it was a marriage of the two. But that's where I think Tok Panjang does have some link to rice stafel.
yes.
Any questions online?
Thank you. Could you guys share with me about any traditions or like rules when it comes to family gatherings with meals together, like things that you would say or share? And could you also share things that you would consider a go-to dish that you would serve for a gathering?
So similar to Chinese culture, so Indonesians eat family style. So you have the rice for each individual, and you have an assortment of dishes in the middle. So you would always offer food to your elders first, and we would say, silakan makan. So please eat. So you always call on your elders to eat first before you do. When there's a last morsel on the plate, you always ask, would anybody like the last piece before you take it? And nobody wants the last piece. I don't know why. So it just gets left off the table. So in terms of special dishes that you would serve at a party or a celebratory occasion, so my mom always prepares gado-gado, and only because it's easy to prepare, and it's great for big groups. But if it's a really special occasion, she would make what is called nasi tumpeng, and it's a cone of yellow rice. And there is an example of a nasi tumpeng in my cookbook, but I think my mom makes really beautiful settings. And so it's yellow rice in the middle, a cone of it, and then at the bottom, you will have dishes like beef rendang or ayam goreng, which is fried chicken. You have tahu tempe goreng, which is tofu and tempeh fried together with shrimp and green beans. And so it's just an assortment of dishes that it's like the cook's choice of what they want to serve at the bottom. So if I remember correctly, the cones is supposedly symbolizes God looking over the people, and the people are the different dishes around the base. So that's one dish that is always served at special occasions like at weddings or births, at births, or even when somebody gets a promotion at work. So that's definitely a key center point.
So in my case, it's the same. You know, we make sure that the elders eat first, and then you know, it's not polite to go grab more food. You know. Yeah, you know, like there's a word for it, like yao kui, right? You know, you're like you're so greedy. So, typically for me, I like to do nasi lemak, and I know it's a Malaysia's national dish. Peranakan's actually had nasi lemak, and also on a very grand scale. I do write about it, about how it was celebrating the 12th day of a wedding. You end the 12 days of a wedding with nasi lemak. So nasi lemak would be, you know, white rice cooked in coconut milk. And I use basmati rice. Then with that, you can actually add an assortment. So in my case, I would have the beef rendang, the dried ikan bilis, which is like anchovies, right? And then egg omelette. But you can also add like chicken curry. You can also have the otak-otak, which is the fish paste that's grilled in banana leaves. But to your point about, you know, like how things are modernizing and changing, if you go to Singapore, for example, if you go to a Peranakan restaurant, it's always the grand classics that people gravitate towards, right? That's what they bring Peranakans for, whether it's the laksa or the or the babi ponte. But increasingly, I think there is more of us cherishing what we grew up eating at home, which were simpler meals. Like recently, I wanted to go back and just do bitter gourd fried with egg, very homey. And I was quite surprised because people who saw that post on Instagram, it resuscitated a lot of their happy memories of growing up. Oh, my grandma used to make that. Oh, my mother used to make that. You know, so I think there's this nostalgic, you know, yearning for the past.
But actually, there are modernized Royal restaurants in Singapore too, right? In November last year, I went. There was one place called Papa. Yeah, but that's the chef. I think is Portuguese. You know, but yeah, the Portuguese. Yeah. But anyway, he basically took all this classic, you know, Nyonya dishes and really give it a little twist, just give it a little extra twist to it. It was really very interesting, actually. Just give it a little twist of like European cooking and some Chinese cooking, just a little twist. It's really quite nice. I enjoyed that. Cool. Rebecca? Yeah. So, do we have any other questions? Well, if not, there's a book available, and local authors will be very happy to analyze it for you. Sharon, you have the
Well, actually, I have a little quick question. So, it you know depends, you know, the specific cuisine. What's your favorite restaurant, like in the city? You know that I know your personal cooking is amazing, but then to us don't understand. Of course, we'll write cookbooks, like Just want to hear your recommendations. Yeah.
There's a place called
Grove Street, right?
Guys,
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
Chinese Nyonya and this I enjoyed it. Sharon, do you have any favorite places?
That's why we need to have chef's table or something, here at the museum. Yeah, yeah.
What's in that?
In Queens, there's like Elmhurst or somewhere.
Kitchen is one of them. It's an medium meat kitchen, and they're decent. For the quiz, so she creates a lot of beautiful modernized cakes. There was I remember she made this pandan tiramisu that's I love pandan. It's a pandan tiramisu. Really long.
It's a great cafe. Okay, that's also in Queens. Or the Green Chapters.
That was with
What that's just
the safely she don't
Okay, great. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming tonight, for joining us, and then, thank you so much for your patience as, distract a little, technical difficulties, and then, people, yeah, round of applause, and also, we also have a little tasting, of the cake. That's okay, no worries. But then, once again, we still, have the cookbooks for sale, as I mentioned. You get them personalized, autographed, and of course, they're sort of a great holiday gift if you're thinking, about giving to someone, your loved one, your family members as a gift. And also we have a lot of upcoming program as well. So next week we have our Mid-Autumn Festival mixer, where we will, feature mahjong, a jazz performance, and of course, some Chinese wine called Qinghong tasting. So then you should come again next Thursday. And then in 2 weeks, we are opening a new exhibition. So it's called Magazine Favorite 10X Asian American Periodicals. So I'm looking at a series of Asian American magazines from the 70s, 80s, 90s to the 2000s. Some, such as A Magazine, Giant Robots, and so on. So then we'll have many programs associated with that. So then we're going to have a very busy fall season. So feel free to follow us on Instagram, social media, our newsletters. So then welcome back to the museum anytime. But then thank you so much for coming. Yeah.